Welcome to Capitol Catch-Up, the podcast that brings you a clear, in-depth look at what's happening on Capitol Hill. I'm Victor.
And I'm Leanie. Today we're unpacking a packed docket, new legislation, key nominations, and recent House proceedings. We'll explain why these moves matter for everyday Americans and how the legislative process works.
Let's start with the Senate's recent action on whistleblower protections. Senate Bill 4631, the Expanding Whistleblower Protections for Contractors Act of 2026, passed the Senate on May 21st. The core of the bill is to broaden the definition of protected whistleblowers to include contractors, subcontractors, and grantees. It also bars federal employees from ordering reprisals and makes clear that any private agreement or arbitration can't waive those rights.
That's a big shift. Historically, whistleblower statutes focused on federal employees, but contractors now make up a sizable share of the federal workforce. By extending protections, the bill aims to encourage reporting of fraud, waste, or abuse across the whole government supply chain. For a contractor who sees a safety violation on a military base, the fear of losing a contract can be a powerful deterrent. This legislation tries to remove that fear.
And the procedural angle is worth noting. The Senate passed the bill by a simple majority, but it still needs to clear the House and be signed by the President before it becomes law. If the House amends it, the two chambers will have to reconcile differences in a conference committee.
Moving on, the Guidance Clarity Act of 2025, Senate Bill 81, also cleared the Senate. It requires every new agency guidance document to carry a front-page statement that the guidance does not have the force of law. The Office of Management and Budget must issue implementing guidance within 90 days.
That addresses a long-standing confusion. Agencies often issue guidance that, while not legally binding, can feel like a rule to the public and businesses. By forcing a clear disclaimer, the bill hopes to keep the line between law and interpretation tidy. It's a transparency measure that could reduce costly litigation over whether a guidance document is enforceable.
The Senate also introduced Senate Bill 78, the Taxpayer Resources Used in Emergencies Accountability Act, sometimes called the True Accountability Act. It mandates that certain agencies develop internal control plans for emergencies, with the Office of Management and Budget issuing guidance within 180 days and reviewing it every 3 years. Notably, the bill bars judicial review of determinations made under its provisions.
That last point, prohibiting judicial review, means agencies get a degree of insulation from lawsuits when they implement these emergency controls. Critics might argue it reduces oversight, but supporters say it allows faster, more decisive action during crises, like natural disasters or public health emergencies.
Speaking of public lands, Senate Bill 537, the Protecting Access for Hunters and Anglers Act of 2025, seeks to prevent blanket bans on lead ammunition or tackle on federal lands and waters managed by the Interior and Agriculture Departments. The secretaries can still impose restrictions if a specific wildlife population decline is linked to lead, and any restrictions must align with state laws.
Lead ammunition has been a contentious environmental issue because of its impact on waterfowl and other wildlife. This bill tries to balance conservation concerns with the interests of hunters and anglers who argue that non-lead alternatives can be more expensive or less effective. It essentially makes the decision case by case, rather than a sweeping prohibition.
Next up is Senate Bill 323, the Proper Leadership to Align Networks for Broadband Act, also known as the Plan for Broadband Act. It tasks the Assistant Secretary of Commerce for Communications and Information with drafting a national strategy to synchronize federal broadband programs. The strategy must be submitted to Congress within a year, and the Government Accountability Office will study its efficacy.
Broadband access remains a major equity issue. The pandemic highlighted how essential high-speed internet is for work, education, and healthcare. By coordinating the many overlapping federal broadband initiatives like the Rural Digital Opportunity Fund and the Emergency Connectivity Fund, the bill aims to reduce duplication and get resources to underserved areas more efficiently.
On the environmental front, Senate Bill 508, the Beaches Environmental Assessment and Coastal Health Act of 2025, amends the Federal Water Pollution Control Act to boost grants for beach monitoring. It expands monitoring to shallow upstream waters, requires states to pinpoint contamination sources, and raises the authorized appropriation to $30 million annually through 2029. The EPA must also issue guidance on innovative testing technologies.
That's a direct response to growing concerns about water quality at popular recreation sites. By funding more comprehensive monitoring and encouraging new testing methods, the bill could help communities issue timely beach advisories and protect public health.
Turning to corrections, Senate Bill 736, the Lieutenant Osvaldo Alvarado Stopping Prison Contraband Act, raises the maximum penalty for smuggling prohibited items, like phones, into prisons to 2 years imprisonment. It also requires the Bureau of Prisons Director to review and update contraband policies within a year.
Contraband, especially smartphones, poses security risks in facilities. The tougher penalties and policy review aim to deter smuggling networks and improve safety for both staff and inmates.
The House also passed a commemorative measure, House Resolution 1993, the 25th anniversary of 9/11 Commemorative Coin Act. It directs the Treasury to mint gold and silver coins honoring the victims and survivors of September 11th, with surcharges funding the National September 11th Memorial and Museum. The legislation ensures the program incurs no net cost to the federal government.
Commemorative coins serve both as a tribute and a fundraising tool. The proceeds help sustain the museum's educational programs and preserve the memory of that day for future generations.
Another Senate initiative, Senate Bill 1473, the Stop Stealing Our Chips Act, amends the Export Control Reform Act of 2018. It creates a whistleblower incentive program that rewards individuals who provide original information, leading to fines on companies that violate export controls. It also establishes an Export Compliance Accountability Fund to pay those awards and offers robust anti-retaliation protections.
Export control violations can threaten national security, especially in the semiconductor sector. By incentivizing insiders to report illicit transfers, the bill hopes to plug gaps in enforcement and protect critical technology supply chains.
In the House, House Resolution 2616, the Stopping Indoctrination and Protecting Kids Act, passed on May 20th. It requires public elementary and middle schools receiving federal funds to obtain parental consent before changing a minor's gender markers, pronouns, or preferred name on school forms or in sex-based facilities. It also bars the use of federal funds to teach concepts tied to gender ideology.
This legislation taps into the broader cultural debate over parental rights versus school autonomy. Proponents argue it restores parental control, while opponents worry it limits inclusive education and could marginalize transgender youth.
The Senate's More Opportunities for Moms to Succeed Act, Senate Bill 1630, commonly called the Moms Act, creates a federal clearinghouse pregnancy.gov to aggregate resources for expecting and postpartum mothers. It also funds grants for telehealth equipment, expands lists of licensed child placement agencies, and supports programs that help women carry pregnancies to term.
Access to reliable information and telehealth can be a lifeline, especially in rural areas where obstetric services are scarce. By centralizing resources, the Moms Act aims to reduce disparities in maternal health outcomes.
Senate Bill 1645, the American Ownership and Resilience Act, proposes a domestic ownership investment facility administered by the Department of Commerce. It would provide leverage up to $5 billion per fiscal year to employee stock ownership plans and worker-owned cooperatives, with safeguards like independent trustees and limits on personal financing.
The idea is to strengthen the domestic economy by encouraging employee ownership, which can improve productivity and resilience. It's a response to concerns that foreign ownership and consolidation threaten American businesses.
The House also moved on financial inclusion with House Resolution 4544, the American Access to Banking Act. It streamlines the application process for new, regulated financial institutions, creates mentorship programs, and requires agencies to develop stakeholder engagement plans. It also reduces the discretionary surplus fund by $24 million effective September 1, 2036.
By lowering barriers for new banks, especially in underserved communities, the Act hopes to expand access to credit and banking services where they're most needed.
Complementing that, House Resolution 3234, the Keeping Deposits Local Act, amends the Federal Deposit Insurance Act to exempt a portion of reciprocal deposits from being treated as broker-obtained funds. It sets exemption percentages based on an institution's liability size and directs the FDIC to study the performance and risks of reciprocal deposits.
The goal is to keep deposits within local banks rather than funneling them through large broker-dealers, supporting community banking and local economic development.
Finally, Senate Bill 1705, the CHIP Security Act, requires the Secretary of Commerce to issue standards for security mechanisms in integrated circuit products exported from the United States. Within 180 days, all exported chips must incorporate these mechanisms, with a secondary set of requirements to follow in 2 years. The bill also authorizes verification of ownership and location of exported products.
In an era where supply chain security is paramount, especially for critical infrastructure, this act seeks to prevent malicious actors from inserting backdoors or tampering with U.S. origin chips. It aligns with broader export control efforts to protect national security.
Let's shift to the nominations that are moving through the Senate. Brock Dahl of Maryland has been nominated to serve as legal advisor of the Department of State, filling the vacancy left by Reed Rubenstein. The legal advisor provides counsel on international law and treaty matters, a role that can shape U.S. diplomatic strategy.
Then we have Evan Rickye from the Virgin Islands, nominated to be a judge for the District Court of the Virgin Islands for a 10-year term, succeeding Wilma Antoinette Lewis. Federal judges in territorial courts handle a mix of civil and criminal cases, and a 10-year term provides a balance between independence and accountability.
And Michael Kavukjian of Florida has been nominated as Ambassador Extraordinary and Plenipotentiary to the Kingdom of Norway. Ambassadors are the president's top representatives abroad, handling everything from trade negotiations to security cooperation. Norway is a key NATO ally, so this post carries strategic importance.
Moving to the House floor, the Congressional Record for May 20th, 2026, Volume 172, Number 86, shows the House began with Speaker pro tempore Eric A. Rick Crawford, followed by a prayer and the Pledge of Allegiance. Members honored Outstanding Young People, Dr. Alice Mann, for her service, and the Chattahoochee Valley Infrastructure Coalition. The House considered several bills, including the Veterans Second Amendment Protection Act, the Shari Briley and Eric Edmondson Veterans Benefits Expansion Act of 2026, and the Smithsonian American Women's History Museum Act. A rule to consider these bills was passed, moving them forward in the legislative process.
The May 19th record, Volume 172, Number 85, focused heavily on community recognitions. Representative Subramaniam highlighted the 30th anniversary of Falcons Landing, a veterans' home, and introduced a resolution to designate May as PSP and CBD Awareness Month, drawing attention to neurodegenerative diseases. He also pressed the USCIS on its backlog. Representative Joyce honored fire service veterans, conservation districts, and local business leaders. Representative Johnson raised the rising cost of healthcare, calling it a fundamental human right. Representative Thompson praised civic engagement and volunteer organizations, while Representative Keeley celebrated the 30th anniversary of Sierra College's Nevada County campus and honored a police chief. These proceedings underscore the House's role in both policy and community acknowledgement.
That wraps up our deep dive. To recap, we've covered a suite of bills ranging from whistleblower protections and agency guidance clarity to broadband strategy, environmental monitoring, prison security, and chip export security. We've discussed nominations that could shape foreign policy, legal counsel, and the federal judiciary, and we've highlighted recent House recognitions and the bills moving through the chamber.
Listeners should keep an eye on the House's next steps with the whistleblower and broadband bills. Watch the Senate debate on the CHIP Security Act and the True Accountability Act, and follow the confirmation hearings for the 3 nominees. Those developments will have tangible effects on transparency, technology security, and everyday services.
Thanks for joining us on Capitol Catch-Up. We'll be back with more analysis as Congress moves forward.
Stay informed, stay engaged, and see you next time.